Standing in my mansion dining room carving Christmas turkey, my 3 children flanked me like soldiers. Michael cleared his throat and said, "We've decided you're no longer part of this family," while I kept carving and smiled, knowing they had no idea what those cream-colored envelopes beside their plates contained. The words hung in the December air like icicles, but my hands remained steady on the carving knife. 40 years of corporate negotiations had taught me to never reveal your position until you're ready to strike. My grandchildren looked confused. Patricia gasped softly, but I just continued carving the 22-pound turkey with practiced precision. "You've become a burden," Caroline added, her voice sharp as her diamond earrings caught the chandelier light. "Always trying to control us with your money and expectations. We're adults now. We don't need you anymore." "Frankly," David chimed in, "we're tired of waiting for our inheritance while you live in this massive house alone, hoarding wealth that should be ours." I set down the carving knife and looked at each of them. Michael, 38, the successful corporate lawyer I'd supported through law school. Caroline, 35, whose boutique empire I'd helped finance. David, 32, my youngest, whose failed ventures I'd bankrolled countless times. 3 children I'd loved unconditionally, now united against their father like a corporate takeover. "I see," I said simply, wiping my hands on the linen napkin. The silence stretched as they waited for anger, tears, or pleading. Instead, I reached into my vest pocket and produced 3 cream-colored envelopes, each sealed with red wax bearing the Grayson family crest. "Well then, if we're ending our relationship tonight, I have something for each of you." I placed an envelope before each child with deliberate care. "Consider it my final gift, a Christmas present, if you will." What they didn't understand was that I'm Samuel Grayson, 62 years old, with a PhD in literature and 40 years of experience reading character motivations. More importantly, they had no idea about my real financial position. While they schemed for what they thought was a $14 million inheritance, I'd quietly built assets worth over $40 million through strategic investments and business acquisitions they knew nothing about. But this confrontation had been 13 months in the making, ever since I'd discovered Michael's name in a document I wasn't supposed to see. I'd been visiting his law office to surprise him for lunch when his secretary mistakenly handed me a client file. One glance revealed everything. My respected lawyer's son had been systematically embezzling from client trust accounts. That discovery led me to Alex Brennan, a former FBI investigator turned private attorney who specialized in the corporate crime. "I need to know everything," I told Alex in his Boston office, about all 3 of them. Alex hadn't judged. He'd simply quoted his rate, and within days had partnered with Linda Harper, one of the East Coast's most skilled private investigators. What they uncovered over the following months was a masterclass in systematic deception. Michael's embezzlement was sophisticated, small amounts from multiple accounts, disguised as administrative fees, totaling nearly $300,000 over 5 years. His firm's audit was scheduled for March. Discovery was inevitable. Caroline's crimes were more brazen. Her boutiques were successful, yes, but not successful enough to justify her tax returns. She'd been laundering money for her married lover, hedge fund manager Richard Blackwood. Linda had photographs, bank records, even recorded conversations of their financial conspiracy. David broke my heart the most. My baby boy wasn't just a failed entrepreneur. He was a middleman for a prescription drug ring operating out of Montreal. He thought cryptocurrency and encrypted messages made him untraceable. He didn't realize his partners were already under DEA surveillance. "Your children are looking at serious prison time," Alex had told me 6 months ago, spreading evidence across my library desk. "Michael could get 5 to 10 years. Caroline, with money laundering charges, possibly more. David." He'd shaken his head. "Drug trafficking carries 20 to life." That's when I'd begun restructuring everything. New wills, new trusts, careful redistribution of assets. The McGrath Foundation, a charity Margaret and I had established, would receive the bulk of my estate. My children would inherit exactly what they had earned, nothing. But I'd needed them to show their true colors first. Linda's surveillance had captured their planning sessions over the past month. 3 privileged adults conspiring to cast out their father like characters in a Shakespearean tragedy. "They're calling it the intervention," Linda had reported last week. Caroline suggested Christmas dinner for maximum emotional impact. Perfect. I'd prepared the envelopes then, each containing carefully curated evidence. Not everything, just enough to show them I knew their secrets, just enough to make them understand that their freedom now depended entirely on my silence. "We're serious about this," Caroline insisted, eyeing her envelope suspiciously. "We've already spoken to lawyers. We want you out of our lives." I picked up my wine glass, a 1982 Chateau Margaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. "Then by all means," I said, raising the glass in a mock toast, "let this be our last supper as a family." The carved turkey sat between us, golden and perfect, while my children stared at their envelopes with growing unease. They had no idea their father had been preparing for this moment all year. They had no idea what evidence those envelopes contained. But they would learn soon enough. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock marking each second, while my children's triumphant expressions morphed into confusion. They'd rehearsed this moment, probably over expensive dinners and conference calls, plotting how to finally free themselves from their burdensome father. What they hadn't anticipated was my complete lack of resistance. I settled back into my chair and began serving myself, spooning cranberry sauce onto my plate with the same methodical care I'd shown for 40 years of family dinners. The normalcy of my actions seemed to unnerve them more than any emotional outburst could have. "Aren't you going to say something?" David asked, his voice cracking. The youngest had always been most transparent, his emotions written across his face. "What would you like me to say?" I replied, cutting into my turkey with precise movements. "You've made your position clear. I accept it." Caroline's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. "That's it? After everything, you're just accepting this?" I chewed slowly, savoring what might be my last taste of Margaret's recipe. Strange how food could taste so good when your world was supposedly crumbling around you. "What did you expect, Caroline? Tears? Begging? I'm 62 years old. I've buried my wife, built a fortune, and raised 3 children. I'm too old for dramatics." Michael, ever the lawyer, narrowed his eyes. "What's in the envelopes?" "Open them and find out." "After dinner, you said?" he countered, suspicious now. "Good. Let him stew in that suspicion." "After dinner, I'd like to enjoy this meal, if you don't mind. Mrs. Peterson spent 3 days helping me prepare it." The mention of our longtime housekeeper reminded them of the life they were so eager to exclude themselves from. This house, these traditions, the staff who'd watched them grow up. All of it would continue without them. Patricia, Michael's wife, finally spoke up. "Samuel, surely we can discuss this like civilized people." "We are being civilized," I interrupted gently. "I'm honoring their wishes. No discussion necessary." My grandchildren were beginning to fidget. Little Emma, Caroline's 8-year-old, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why is everyone being weird?" "Eat your dinner, sweetheart," Caroline said automatically, though she hadn't touched her own plate. I smiled at Emma. "Would you like some more mashed potatoes, dear?" She nodded enthusiastically, and I served her myself, adding an extra pat of butter the way she liked. These small gestures, a grandfather serving his granddaughter, seemed to increase the tension rather than ease it. "This is insane," David muttered, running his hands through his hair. "You're acting like we just told you about the weather." I set down my fork and looked at each of them with the same steady gaze I'd used in countless boardrooms. "What would you prefer, David? Should I rage, threaten to cut you off, beg for your love?" I shook my head slowly. "I've never begged for anything in my life. I won't start now." The envelope sat before them like ticking bombs. Michael had moved his aside, but his eyes kept darting back to it. Caroline had placed hers in her lap, her fingers worrying at the wax seal. David had left his exactly where I'd placed it, as if touching it might trigger some trap. "You planned this," Michael said suddenly, his courtroom instincts finally engaging. "You knew we were going to do this tonight." I allowed myself a small smile. "Did I?" The envelopes were already prepared, sealed with wax no less. Very theatrical, Dad. "I prefer to think of it as traditional. Your mother loved wax seals, said they made everything feel more significant." The mention of Margaret silenced him. She had been the heart of this family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and brought us together. Since her death 8 years ago, we'd been slowly drifting apart, held together only by tradition and my stubborn insistence on maintaining family dinners. 10 minutes, I announced, checking my watch. 10 more minutes, and then you can open your gifts and leave. I assume you'll want to leave immediately after. They exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their carefully planned evening. Where will you go? Caroline asked, a hint of her old self peeking through the cold facade. Why do you care? I asked genuinely. I'm no longer family, remember? She flushed and looked away. During those final 10 minutes, I finished my meal with deliberate calm, even having a second helping of stuffing. My children pushed food around their plates, the envelopes drawing their attention like magnets. Finally, I stood and raised my glass one last time. To family, I said, my voice carrying neither irony nor sadness. Whatever that means. Not one of them raised their glass in return. You can open them now, I said, settling back to watch. The first envelope tore with a sound like ripping silk. Michael's face went white as he pulled out photographs, himself at the Cayman Islands Bank, depositing client funds into his personal account. Bank records, transaction logs, a complete paper trail of his embezzlement. Caroline's envelope contained surveillance photos of her and Richard Blackwood, bank statements showing money transfers, recorded conversations discussing their laundering operation. Her designer dress suddenly seemed like costume jewelry as she stared at the evidence of her crimes. David's hands shook so violently he could barely hold the DEA surveillance logs, the encrypted messages his partners had already surrendered, the detailed records of every drug transaction he'd facilitated. What have you done? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. I walked to my chair and sat down calmly. I've given you exactly what you asked for. Freedom from me, from this family, from the lies you've been living. You've been spying on us, Caroline shrieked. I hired investigators, yes. Imagine my surprise when those investigations revealed my children were criminals. Dad, please, David stepped forward, his bravado completely shattered. The DEA, they don't know yet. I let the words hang in the air. The reports are scheduled to be filed January 2nd, unless. Unless what? Michael had found his lawyer voice again, though it trembled. I gestured to the papers scattered before them. Read the last page. They scrambled for the documents. I waited, watching their faces change as they absorbed the full scope of their situation. Everything, Caroline gasped. You're giving everything to charity, to Mother's family in Colorado. The house, the investments, the company shares, all of it, I confirmed. The will is already filed, irrevocable. I leaned back in my chair. Unless you contest it, of course, but that would require a very public legal battle. Discovery would be quite thorough. You're blackmailing us, Michael accused. Blackmail implies I want something from you. I want nothing. You made that clear tonight. I stood, walking to the window. I'm simply ensuring a clean break. You wanted me out of your lives. This guarantees it. The McGrath Foundation gets $8 million, David read, his voice hollow. Colorado Children's Hospital, $4 million. The Hartley Family Trust. Who the hell are the Hartleys? Your mother's real family, I said simply. The ones who never asked for anything except her love. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face pale with confusion. Michael, what's happening? Get the children, he told her curtly. We're leaving. As Patricia fled, Caroline found her voice. You planned this. You knew we were going to disown you. Your conference calls weren't as private as you thought. I turned to face them. What I didn't plan was discovering how far you'd fallen. That was all you. We're your children, David exploded. Your blood. Blood? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Margaret's sister Elena calls me every week. Her children send birthday cards, invite me for holidays. They've never asked for a penny. That's blood. You three are just strangers who happen to share my DNA. Michael was calculating rapidly. The evidence. You'll need to give us everything. All copies, all files. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video of Alex Brennan in his office, surrounded by boxes of documents. My attorney has everything. Upon my death, natural or otherwise, he has instructions to forward all materials to the appropriate authorities. Unless we disappear, Caroline finished, understanding the finally dawning. Unless you honor your own wishes, I corrected. You wanted me out of your lives. I'm simply ensuring the separation is permanent. What about our children? Caroline's voice broke. Your grandchildren? Your grandchildren will grow up knowing their parents chose money over family, just as you did tonight. I moved toward the door. You have 72 hours to leave Vermont. After that, any contact with me will trigger the release of these documents. You're destroying our lives, David said desperately. I stopped at the threshold. No, David. You destroyed your lives with your choices. I'm just refusing to enable those choices anymore. The money from Mom's family, Michael said suddenly. The 20 million? That's real? Very real, and very much not yours. I pulled out one final envelope. Elena Hartley asked me to give you this. It's a letter your mother wrote before she died. She knew this day might come. I set it on the table. She loved you despite what you'd become. I loved you because of what you were. Neither of us loved you enough to save you from yourselves. Dad, Caroline stood, reaching out desperately. Please, we can fix this. No. The word was final. You made your choice at 8:43 tonight. You disowned me in front of your children, in our family home, on Christmas. There's no fixing that. I heard sirens in the distance. Oh, I should mention, David, your partners in Montreal were arrested 6 hours ago. The DEA will be looking for you soon. You might want to contact a lawyer, though obviously not Michael. He'll have his own problems soon enough. The color drained from David's face. You called them. I gave you 72 hours. Use them wisely. I looked at each of my children one last time. Your mother would be heartbroken, but not surprised. She saw this coming. She tried to warn me, but I was too blinded by love to see it. This isn't over, Michael threatened. Yes, it is. I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. Goodbye. Behind me, I heard Caroline break down completely, David cursing, Michael shouting orders, but I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs to pack a single suitcase. Colorado was beautiful this time of year, and I had a real family waiting to meet me. The grandfather clock chimed 10 as I reached my bedroom. In 2 hours, it would be December 26th, my first day of freedom. The next hour was chaos incarnate. From my bedroom, I could hear destruction unfolding below. The doorbell rang. I watched through the upstairs window as 2 FBI agents presented their badges to a stunned Michael. The warrant was for David specifically. Apparently, his partners had been more cooperative than anticipated. The arrest was swift and professional. David didn't resist. He simply looked up at my window as they handcuffed him, his eyes holding a mixture of hatred and defeat. Caroline tried to intervene, screaming about lawyers and rights, but the agents ignored her as the black sedan pulled away with David in the back seat. She collapsed on the snow-covered driveway, her designer heels useless against the ice. Michael pulled her up roughly. Get inside, now. Through the chaos, I continued packing methodically. One suitcase, photos of Margaret, her favorite sweater that still smelled of lavender, the watch she'd given me for our anniversary. The rest could stay in this mausoleum of memories. Caroline appeared in my doorway. Her makeup was destroyed, her dress torn at the shoulder where Michael had grabbed her. She looked like a ghost of the daughter I once knew. He's gone, she said hollowly. David's gone. They said he's looking at 25 to life. I continued folding shirts. He made his choices. How can you be so cold? She stumbled into the room, reeking of wine. We're falling apart and you're just packing. What would you have me do, Caroline? Call my contacts, hire lawyers, use my influence? I turned to face her. I'm not family anymore, remember? You revoked my privileges at dinner. She laughed hysterically. This can't be happening. This morning everything was perfect. We had it all planned out. Michael said it would be simple. Cut you out, contest the will later, split everything 3 ways. Michael says a lot of things, like how he'd never steal from clients. Her face crumpled. Richard's not answering my calls. His wife. She must know about the photos you have. Actions have consequences, Caroline. You taught me that tonight. She sank onto the bed, my bed, Margaret's bed. Mom would have forgiven us. No, I said firmly. She would have loved you, but she wouldn't have enabled you. There's a difference. The letter, she whispered. Mom's letter. We read it. I waited. She knew about all of it. She wrote that she'd failed us by loving us too much, by protecting us from consequences. Caroline's voice broke. She said the hardest thing a parent could do was let their children face the truth of who they'd become. Your mother was wise. She also wrote that she'd hidden money, that she had another family who showed her what real love looked like. Caroline looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Were we really that terrible? I sat beside her, maintaining distance. You weren't terrible children. You became terrible adults. There's a difference. When? She asked. When did we become this? The day you decided my worth was measured in dollars. The day Michael justified his first theft. The day David decided the world owed him happiness. The day you forgot that family is about more than inheritance. Downstairs, I could hear Michael on the phone with his law partners. Even from here, I could tell it wasn't going well. By tomorrow, the senior partners would know about the missing funds. By Monday, he'd be suspended pending investigation. I have to go, Caroline said suddenly. Richard's wife is posting on Facebook. Photos of us together. Everyone will know by morning. She stood, swaying slightly. For what it's worth, I did love you once, before it all got so complicated. I know, I said simply. I loved you too. That's why this hurts so much. She left without another word. Alex Brennan called. It's done. The transfers are complete. The McGrath Foundation, the Colorado Trusts, all of it. Irrevocable as of midnight. Thank you, Alex. Samuel, are you sure about this? It's not too late to... It's been too late for years. I just refuse to see it. As midnight approached, I heard car engines starting. Michael's BMW, Caroline's Mercedes, Patricia's SUV, loaded with crying grandchildren who didn't understand why they were leaving Grandpa's house without saying goodbye. I stood at the window, watching their taillights disappear into the snowy night. In the distance, church bells began chiming midnight. December 26th, the death of one life, the birth of another. My phone buzzed, a text from Elena Hartley. Your room is ready whenever you are. Rebecca is flying in from Denver tomorrow. James is bringing his famous chili. Beth says to bring photos. We want to hear all about Margaret's life with you. Drive safe. Family is waiting. Family, real family waiting for me. I closed the suitcase and took one last look around the room where Margaret and I had shared 30 years of love. I'm sorry, my darling, I whispered. I couldn't save them, but maybe that was never my job. The house was silent now, empty. In the morning, Mrs. Peterson would find my letter and severance check. The real estate agent would list the property. The lawyers would handle the rest. Tonight, I had 700 miles to drive and a new family to meet. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The Grayson family died at Christmas dinner, just as my children had planned. They just hadn't expected to be the corpses. I reached Colorado at sunset on December 27th. The Hartley Ranch sprawled across 500 acres of pristine wilderness, mountains rising majestically in the background. As I pulled up the long driveway, I saw them waiting on the wraparound porch. Elena, her children, their families. 15 people who'd never met me, but had loved Margaret, and through her, loved me. Elena embraced me like a long-lost brother. Welcome home, Samuel. Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated feeling. That evening, as we sat around their massive dinner table, I told them everything about the investigation, the confrontation, the envelopes. They listened without judgment, occasionally reaching out to touch my hand in support. You did the right thing, Rebecca said quietly. She looked so much like Margaret it took my breath away. Enabling them would have been the real cruelty. Margaret knew this day would come, Elena added. She told me once that her greatest fear wasn't dying. It was leaving you alone with children who'd forgotten how to love. Over the following days, I learned what family really meant. James taught me to ride horses again. Beth showed me photo albums filled with pictures Margaret had sent over the years. Rebecca introduced me to her patients at the clinic where Margaret's secret donations had funded free health care for thousands. 6 months later, I stood in the Colorado sunshine teaching James's son to fish in the same stream where Margaret had learned decades ago. Elena watched from the bank, smiling at the sight of her grandson laughing with his new grandfather. "She would be so happy," Elena said gently. "Yes," I agreed. "She would." That night, I received one final message from Alex Brennan, a photo from the Burlington newspaper. My former home had been demolished, the land donated to the city for a public park. They were calling it the Margaret Grayson Memorial Garden. I smiled and deleted the message. That life was over. This one, filled with Sunday dinners and grandchildren who called just to say hello, with family who valued love over money. This was Margaret's final gift. The man who'd lost everything at Christmas dinner had found something infinitely more valuable, a family that knew how to love. Margaret had saved me after all, just not in the way any of us expected.